project, Entering a New Chapter, which calls to address joblessness, educational inequities, and lack of housing, not by providing schools, providing jobs, and other resources, but answered by making the policing system a catch-all solution to different social problems that arise within communities. Problems that the role of a police officer was not meant to address. And this results in police officers becoming disruptors. You have countless examples of police meticulously planning the downfall of these efforts of communities building collective power and political capital to fight back against these different institutional barriers and provide their community with the resources and safety that cannot be provided by the police themselves. Take, for example, what happened on December 4th, 1969, when Fred Hampton was targeted and killed by police officers in cooperation with the FBI because he was building a political voice, an autonomous voice for the Black community, not just in Chicago, but even nationwide. That sort of tradition of targeting different leaders, different people who are speaking out against injustice that the police is causing has continued over time, as we see today with the police brutality exhibited at peaceful protests that are led by Black Lives Matter, that are led by other organizations that are working to bring racial justice to our society.
I mean, exactly that. And with the case of Fred Hampton, you're seeing this organized work happening between the police, FBI, and higher levels to kind of suppress the movement. And it's interesting because it's this working between larger people at play, and now kind of these alternatives when we seeing tech companies getting their coin and then also helping the police. We're seeing that's increased surveillance, increasing the interactions people of color, specifically Black people of color, have with police. And this is all due to kind of these new relationships that are formed that consistently are doing the work that this system was intended to do, which was to support the rhetoric and acts of anti-Blackness in this country. And it's completely obvious, as we see in the case of Fred Hampton being murdered and assassinated, and now we're seeing it every day with the experiences of over-policing and, in one way you can put it, but again, just simply being the militarization of police. Period. But Chase, this one question I kind of want us to lead off before we get into our Brown breakdown with our amazing speaker. I guess kind of want to know your last thoughts on how people of color have found and utilized collective community to fight against injustice and create new meanings of justice. And what is a conversation we want to get into in just a bit in the Brown breakdown?
Yeah, I think that people of color have been doing this not just now, as we're seeing a lot more, but they've been doing this for a long time. There's a long history of people fighting back against injustice, building collective community, building collective power. And I think one way that people are really trying to do this is by coming together in these different circumstances of either police violence or injustice by the carceral system to not only strategize together as how to get their loved ones out of incarceration, but also learning together about the ways in which the law actively works against us and the ways in which people in positions of power within the legal system actively work to either keep us incarcerated or to embed us into the carceral system as we're trying to fight for our loved ones and people that we care about who are experiencing incarceration. That's just one way of people who have really come together to fight injustice in these different organizations, community-based organizations. I should also say there's a centering of healing and a centering of community care and an expectation that everyone within this space, everyone within this community will look out for each other and help each other. And also, with that comes mutual aid making sure people have housing, making sure if someone needs help finding a job, that like we help them find a job. And I think that's something very unique and very special, but also something that that's not something that a lot of people think about because of the way the American system has worked under capitalism, which has resulted in us becoming a lot more individual, kind of like looking out just for ourselves. And tied to that, when there is this collective community being built, oftentimes it's disrupted or dismantled by institutions such as the police or the carceral system. And to me, that's like one of the big reasons why a lot of these different meanings of justice, a lot of these forms of collective power have not been realized on a larger scale because they're a threat to the status quo, because they're a threat to the way the US government is able to function, the way the law is able to function to protect white people and protect white property. And I think part of the challenge is getting people to see that the only real sustainable way for us to keep each other safe, for us to resolve these different social problems that the police system clearly isn't helping, is by providing each other with the resources to resolve these issues and providing each other with the safety that the police only gives to certain people.
Exactly right. And I'm really excited for us to have our round table now. Again, we're going to be going into these conversations of how we ourselves and our communities heal, bring safety, and create the justice that we as a community want to seek. So for that, we'll see you on the other side with the Brown Breakdown.
It's the Brown Breakdown.
What do you feel or think about when you envision a cohesive community, a safe community?
When I think of a safe community, I don't really think of cops. I sort of think back to when I was at a Care Not Cops rally and a professor spoke about how in a community, like, it's up to the people within that community to lift each other up and to make each other feel safe. But right now, communities are not really built that way because of the systems that we have in place, including policing. So I think that obviously there needs to be some protection, just in general, but I don't think that policing is the way to do it. I think that the community can protect itself and can, like, make things for itself without the state and the police interfering in that thing. I think that it would be very helpful if people were allowed to, like, come together in a way that has not been previously seen. I feel like a lot of times communities are pitted against each other, like individuals, and it makes it feel like you can't go to another person when you have an issue. But I think that in a safe, cohesive community, you guys all can reach out to each other and know that, like, you have that lifeline if you need it.
My ideal community, I think in a word, would just be resources, having access to resources. And that would be healthcare, that would be mental health resources, that would be food, education, housing, the ability to have all of these things without any stipulations, to be able to have basic necessities and to survive without having to produce anything, just having survival be a basic human right. In terms of policing or surveillance or state violence, those things don't have a place in an actually safe community, especially thinking about Black and Brown communities that have been targeted by state violence in a multitude of different ways, not just through policing, through Medicaid being ripped away from people, through the bureaucratic process of filing for unemployment, through a myriad of different things. We see this racism kind of trickle into a lot of different aspects of our system as it is. And in my ideal community, I think, especially in my safe ideal community, people are able to lean on their neighbors, on their community, to have access to resources and also to have access to love and support and care for one another.
Today, KSFam, we are joined by Alycia Kamil, who is an artistic abolitionist healer. She's a leader of one of Chicago's intersectional violence prevention groups, Good Kids Mad City. Aside from the group organizing work she does, she has her own projects such as Undoing Our Erasure, a podcast turned workshop series where she brings on youth of color to talk about the things they're usually removed from, as well as formulating workshops for educational purposes. She created Solistic Healing as an outlet to provide tarot divination services and radical self-love/care tips for the public. Please join me in welcoming Alycia Kamil. Thank you, Alycia, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Today has been super hectic only because I'm just doing a lot of mutual aid stuff, some housing things going on, and also just trying to find time to still rest and chill and everything. But I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, rest is definitely important, especially with everything going on right now. Lena, how are you doing? How's the week been going for you?
The week, we're recording on Friday, so that's always my favorite because the work obviously still continues, but she takes a break on Friday evenings, hopefully, just, for that mental health check, just like Alycia was saying. But I'm really excited to be having this conversation because I think this is exactly the conversation we need to be having today, tomorrow, and just continuing, is talking about specifically reimagining justice, power, safety for the people and communities that we're a part of, that we care about. So, Alycia, I wanted to start off because, Chase gave you an amazing introduction, and I was just wondering, you play a lot of roles. You play a role as a healer, as a poet, as an artist, and really I'm thinking about how all these different roles that you play could and do play into the broader goals of abolition. And I was wondering how we can use art as a way to build community power.
Art and just really writing specifically really actually brought me into doing a lot of the activism work that I do now. I competed in Louder Than a Bomb, which is the really big poetry slam competition that happens here in Chicago. And so being in spaces like that and seeing people use poetry, 3-minute poems in order to put together a really good piece about social justice issues. That was one of my first times where I ever really wrote about the intersectionality of being a Black woman, being a Black queer woman. And so that was kind of my first space of being able to put that out and write about it. And then within that work, I was introduced into a lot of different organizing spaces as well, because some of the people who actually brought me into Good Kids Mad City were also poets in Louder Than a Bomb. So even just seeing the connection that was already there. And I always think that art is just super important in the movement because it also brings a lot of accessibility to everything. I feel like if you aren't somebody who's able to go to actions or able to go to marches, or if you aren't somebody who's able to just pick up a book by Bell Hooks and understand everything that's going on off bat, you can read a poem or watch a show or watch a short film, watch a clip, listen to a song, and you're able to pick up your own messages from it. So I definitely think that it's important of adding it into the work that we do, because it also allows space for healing to happen too. A lot of my most moments of feeling comfortable enough to write and feeling comfortable enough to express the trauma that I've gone through in organizing spaces has been through art. So I definitely think that it's a really important aspect that I'm glad is more and more being recognized in community work.
Thinking about last year, 2020, even though we left her, she still exists in 2021. I was wondering if there's something that you'd want our KSFam to maybe check out, or something that you feel is restorative and maybe gives you energy.
Really, one of my favorite poets is Dinesh Smith. They're a really good writer. Homie by Dinesh Smith came out, I want to say 2020 or 2019, but a very recent book, really good poetry book that has inspired a lot of pieces that I wrote. One of my really good friends, Jalen, they're an artist. They also do work with me in Good Kids Mad City. They make phenomenal music, phenomenal music, and music that's also very kind of even aided into the work that we do. You can, I think on Apple Music it's JFK. I can also send the social media to also go check them out too. So those are definitely two kind of favorite projects of this past year.
I want to touch on something you said about art being